through some updates. There are a lot of actually interesting things happening right now in the world of college admissions. So the first thing I'd like to let you know about is that USC, the University of Southern California, is now adding an early action option for its students. Now, that actually has some interesting implications because for a while, USC was actually one of the only top 25 schools in addition to UCLA and Berkeley. Of course, UCLA and Berkeley being UCs do not or cannot have any sort of early action, right? It just would go against what the system actually has set up. But USC was kind of an interesting curiosity in the sense that was the only top private school in the top 25 that didn't have either early action or early decision. So, the timing of this is actually kind of curious, but it may have some interesting effects. First, anybody applying to EA, any students applying to EA for USC will automatically be considered for its merit scholarships. In the past, you needed to submit your application by December 1st to be eligible to be considered for merit scholarships. So by default, anybody who applies by November 1st, which is the EA deadline, will automatically be in the pool of consideration for merit scholarships. Okay. Now, one of the things that we're predicting is that this will actually decrease USC's overall acceptance rate even more so than the current 12%. And the reasoning for this is quite simple. One, it'll probably add more popularity to USC simply because now students would be able to apply to them earlier. Second is that, certain rankings, like US News, for instance, they do factor in things like the yield rate of a university. And so any school with early action or early decision will be able to scoop up more students in the early round, right? And presumably that might help USC rise up in the rankings over the next few years. Okay. One of the key things, though, is that this might prove to be a unique opportunity for certain students who are on top of things, because there's not going to be a lot of students who are completely aware that USC will have EA, right? So this could be a good opportunity if USC is one of your top schools or perhaps your top school to apply for early decision, because it's been shown in previous years when schools just newly add early decision or bring it back, as in the case with Princeton, for instance, which took away EA for like a couple of years and then decided to bring it back last year, the acceptance rate for EA is going to be higher relative to some other schools that have had it for a long time. So this could actually present you with a great opportunity if you're thinking of applying to USC for early action, simply because you might have a better shot at your potential target or dream school, okay? Now, another big news item recently is that Columbia University has actually lost its US News rankings, which is really kind of shocking because they were actually co-number 2 along with MIT and I believe Harvard, right? Princeton had been number 1 for many, many years now. Okay, so here's what happened. A few days back, Columbia basically said that they would no longer participate in the US News rankings, and they cited some sort of internal investigation of their data, right? My read on this is that they were just trying to get ahead of the fact that they were going to lose the ranking anyway and trying to make it seem like, oh, we willingly, just did not want to participate in US News. But the truth of the matter is what happened is that there was a Columbia University mathematics professor who started sort of like questioning, like a whistleblower, some of the things that were going on in terms of the data that Columbia was reporting to US News, right? And so the suggestion here, of course, is that the university was deliberately sort of like tweaking or falsifying the numbers to try to make them look more competitive in the rankings. So what happened is that US News actually then officially said, hey, we're taking Columbia off of the rankings, right? And it's still unknown when or if they're going to potentially bring back Columbia in the rankings. I think it's more of a matter of if or when, sorry. So this should be a problem that should be corrected in about a year or two, typically when things like this happens. But it's still important to remember that this does not really sort of affect the actual value of a Columbia University education. So if Columbia is on your list of colleges, you should still consider it, because after all, I mean, US News rankings, for something like this, like it being unranked doesn't all of a sudden mean that Columbia University is going to be, the same tier as a lot of unranked universities out there, right? It's still going to be highly competitive and you're still getting an Ivy League education out of it, okay? Lastly, there's no imminent news on this, but one thing that we should all look for in the coming months is that affirmative action may very well be the next Supreme Court target, right? So a lot of insiders and a lot of experts, legal experts, are now saying that the 2014 case, the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard, is expected to be in the docket for the Supreme Court for 2022-2023. Now, this could have really seismic implications as far as college admissions goes, because if the Supreme Court were to overturn and get rid of affirmative action, much like they did Roe versus Wade, this would pretty much get rid of affirmative action policies throughout all the colleges across the nation. There is also a separate case going on right now against the University of North Carolina by the same group. So it could very well impact both public and private universities. Now, the key thing to remember here is that the Supreme Court is currently a 6-3 majority for conservative judges or justices, right? Which means since affirmative action tends to be a policy that is more liberal leaning, right? A lot of universities want it to be able to kind of like increase the number of underrepresented minorities they have. This could actually be a huge thing as far as, like admissions for years to come, right? If affirmative action were to be overturned, what this ends up happening is that, I mean, depending on where you stand on the political spectrum, it could be a good or bad thing, right? So I would say, like, if you're an advocate of, let's say, diversity in colleges, you want to be able to go to school with a wider array of people from different cultural backgrounds, then of course it's going to be a blow, right? If you're Asian American, okay, like, I think the vast majority of our students are, and purely from a self-interest perspective, this could be much better for you, of course, right? Because if schools were not allowed to use affirmative action, then we're going to see a shift in terms of private school acceptance rates being maybe a little closer to what the UCs have now, right? Because in California, it is still illegal to use affirmative action when it comes to college admissions. So we may very well see Berkeley type numbers, which is maybe anywhere from like 35 to 40% Asian, as opposed to the current Ivy League distribution, which is anywhere from like maybe 15 to 20 something percent as far as the Asian population goes. So yeah, it could be big. So I think this is definitely something that we're going to need to pay close attention to in the coming months. All right. So now that I've gotten you up to date on in terms of like the more recent developments, so what does this have to do with college applications? Well, a lot, right? Because as of right now, every single Ivy League school has gotten much harder to get into, right? So the last 2 years has seen pretty dramatic drops in terms of the acceptance rates. So of course, any news that could maybe help turn the tide a little bit and help make it easier for students to get into these top colleges, especially if you're Asian American, would definitely be a welcome change, right? Okay, so now the focus of this seminar today is more on the digital SAT. Those of you who are not familiar with this, a few months back, College Board went ahead and gave an announcement that they were going to add a brand new version of the SAT starting in March 2024 for domestic students, and this upcoming spring if you're an international student. Okay, so what this means basically is that they're going to get rid of the old pencil and paper test and replace it with a digital format test starting, like I said, for domestic students, March of 2024. So keep in mind, even though this is a digital test, this is not going to be an online test, much like the AP tests were during the height of the pandemic, right? This is not a test you can take from home. Rather, students will go either to their own schools or to a certified testing center like a Prometrics testing center, or some other locations like a Kaplan testing center or something like that, where they can go ahead and bring their laptops or a tablet and then go ahead and take the SAT there. Okay. Now, one of the potential upsides of this type of a test is that the test will be shorter, right? So whereas the current paper version is projected to be about 3 hours long, this digital SAT is about 2 hours and a little over 2 hours, so like 2 hours and 14 minutes. So that's obviously going to be a plus for students because then you don't necessarily have to be sitting there for so long. Okay. The other possible benefit from this, of course, is that you get quicker results. Currently, it takes about 2.5 weeks or so for the SAT results to come out, right? With this new version, it should really just take a matter of days. So we don't know exactly. That's College Board just says days instead of weeks. So it remains to be seen whether or not they're going to have it. Now, theoretically, for a digital test, the results could even come out within the same day. I know for other ETS type tests, the GRE, for instance, which is administered by ETS, which is the College Board parent company, the results are really available in the same day, right? So hopefully if they streamline the process, that could mean within a day or two that you get your scores back, okay? Now, the other thing too is that College Board has gone to great lengths to say that the scoring will remain the same. This not only means that the SAT scale will still remain as 1600, but they are going to great lengths to assure both students and colleges that let's say a 1400 will mean the same thing as a 1400 in the new digital test, right? So they're calibrating both test formats. So whatever results you get from the digital version should, in theory, match what you would have gotten out of the paper exam. Okay, whether or not that will hold true in practice remains to be seen, right? So we won't really know this until 2024 exactly how this is going to unfold. Okay, so we'll see how this goes. All right, so it looks like there's something on the Q&A right now.